On this episode of That Kingsville podcast, Sebastian Schmoranz from McGregor Sims Schmoranz joins, that's a tongue twister, McGregor Sims Schmoranz joins us here on That Kingsville podcast as we discuss the saga
Genesis
of 183 Main Street. We have all the information. We did a Freedom of Information request for some details as well, and Kevin has done deeds homework. Join us for this episode of That Kingsville podcast coming up next. That Kingsville podcast is brought to you by Kingsville Brewery. Fall is officially here, which means it's almost #Stout season. To celebrate, our Stout season merch is now on sale in the Canadian merch store. Visit shopkingsvillebrewery.ca and get your hands on some while supplies last. Gentlemen,
#merch.
Hashtag
merch.
Hoodie. Yeah, the
Hashtag wear it.
Also, if you're at Yalsop Pumpkin Patch out on Road 3, they have been serving Kingsville Brewery products out there. So while you're out there doing the maze, which is Harry Potter themed, and it got some big press from
it's
our
quite
city.
Magical.
Ooh, I don't know. Your wife knows Harry Potter. I know nothing. But thank you to Kingsville Brewery for supporting That Kingsville podcast. Welcome to That Kingsville podcast. I'm your host, Dave Hunt. With me, Kevin Black, Steve Ianson, special guest, Sebastian Schmoranz from McGregor Sims Schmoranz law firm here in Kingsville. Gentlemen, Meet the Candidates 2022. Excellent event.
Fantastic.
Well received. Lots of commentary. Appreciative of Gary and his production, Quantum Sound Productions. For all you that are at home, Gary helped with
in need of some production.
Well, right. Gary did all the audio and video production. All the candidates had opportunity to clip portions of the video to use for their own disposal. So
some have been too. Actually, it's funny. Like every few days, get a notification through like, oh, so and so's shared your video again.
Yeah. Oh,
smart.
Almost on the same level were the MC and the moderator. I thought both did quite a good job, especially when the moderator attempted to cut off the MC, which was
that's the comedic value of our professional show.
Time's up.
It's
over. Set that one up nicely.
Yeah, I have to apologize. I am wearing my MC outfit.
Is that houndstooth?
Houndstooth. Yeah, I am not, as many seem to think, I'm not a professional podcaster. I do have a full-time job, and I've just come from it. So I look a little bit...
Panhandling on Bay Street.
Yeah, unlike Mr. Schmoranz, who this is, lawyer attire.
It's casual attire, too.
I even wore a lapel flower for you guys.
You did.
Beautiful.
You did. It is quite poignant. So, yeah. No,
council news. Do you want to do council news?
Council news.
I'm surprised the council discussed such a controversial issue at a meeting that's right before an election, because it's not normal. That's not the way it normally works. But they came through with new guidelines for temporary foreign worker housing or bunk houses. So, like, we can get into the actual decision, but really, it's not a whole lot of significant change. It just kind of lays it out a little bit better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, provides some boundaries.
Yeah, exactly. And some of it was already happening, and this sort of and puts it into the policies a little bit more firmly. Yeah. But I think the thing, like, why were they talking about this now? Like, why wasn't this something that just waited till November?
Yeah, I don't understand with it kind of being the end of this current sitting council's legacy. Like, is that how we want to kind of end our term kind of thing and go on? Or was it that pressing that it had to get resolved before?
I don't know. Like, I feel like this is the time when, like, they should be, high-fiving each other and, passing some notices of motion about how great they think they are.
I suppose, again, to play devil's advocate to you guys, the business isn't going to stop just because the term's coming to an end.
That's true.
So if they look at it and say, hey, my term is for 4 years, this is on the table, this needs to be dealt with, then deal with it.
You're right.
At the end of the day, like, at the same token, while they might turn around and say, yeah, but you know what? This is done now, and it's a feather in our cap, so to speak, without patting themselves on the back. But people will see that and say, hey, you know what? They are business till the end. So
yeah,
that's true. But as well as I do, that's not normal. like usually the last couple council meetings before an election are kind of phoned in because it's not officially lame duck, but there's not a whole lot of
all
big
6 people around are on that council table are all running again, some against each other. Yep. So, I don't know that really they can mail it in at this point.
I don't know, legacy. And, on that point, legacy, there's been a few controversial events and things that have happened through this council's sitting term. One on a previous episode of the podcast, Sebastian, you came in and spoke about the 200 Main Medical Center and whatnot. And another one that had happened in town being 183 Main Street.
Where?
And 183 Main.
Oh, yeah. That's the one that's near the high school.
The one across from the high school. Yes. And as we briefly discussed in the last episode, prior to our Meet the Candidates event, the OLT had come to a conclusion. So now with that being the end of the saga, we wanted to do a situation in review of the 183 Main saga.
And Dave, we're going deep, like very, very deep in 183 Main.
How deep are we going?
So deep. Let me take you back to a time in Kingsville, roughly the mid 1800s, when a young man by the name of Bon Jasperson, a boy named Bon, was born to Frederick Jasperson, one of the founders of Kingsville, a former fur trader.
Oh.
Bon would grow up and be a business magnate in this town. Magnate in this town.
Magnate. Not like the polar.
Attracted businesses.
Like refrigerator. Is he the little bananas and the apples from the 70s? Go on. Moving on.
Very quick on Bon. Bon had some oil and gas developments on Peely. He's one of the people who clear cut Peely and milled all the wood in Romney. Good old Bon was one of the first general store owners in town. He also had a grain company. He was a partial investor in some petro and oil in Chatham. So this guy had cash.
Had a street too.
And so now he has a street. Built himself a beautiful home in 1903 on Main Street, known as the Bon Jasperson House.
Mm-hmm.
And next door to it, in roughly 1924, he says, you know what, Esther, my daughter, getting married, I'm going to give you a home.
And where did he find that home?
For your marriage.
Where did he find that home?
So he went into, and this is going to come up later, he apparently went into a catalog for a company based out of Bay City, Michigan, and ordered the home that's on the front page of that catalog and said, I want this home to be built for my daughter, Esther, who marries T.D. Campbell, a dentist in Kingsville at the time, and it becomes known as the Campbell House.
Mm-hmm.
So Esther lives there till 1973 in the Campbell House. Okay,
wonderful.
So we've made our way through.
We jumped about 50.
So Esther lives there in 183 Main until 1973, at which time changes owners. I'm not sure if this is the point, and this is where it gets a little foggy. Not sure if this is the point where the Kron family takes it over.
Kron.
I'm sorry,
Kron family.
But I can tell you later on in the 2000s, it became the Garden Manor Bed and Breakfast.
Yep.
And was a fairly popular bed and breakfast in the town. But in 2017, it was listed for sale. And Royal LePage had it listed for $675,000 in 2017.
Yeah, the house and the acreage was what, almost 2 acres of property?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Beautiful. And the home was
in 17. So that was
2017.
That was before the big housing price increase in town. So that was right before.
Right.
Yep.
So Brado Developments purchased it for 600. Well, it was listed as 675. Don't know what they purchased it for, but Brado Developments purchases it on condition that they're able to rezone it to build apartment building development on the property.
Mm-hmm.
So a couple of years goes by, and in 2019 they filed the rezoning bylaw amendment. And so at this point, they go to the town and say, we'd like to rezone this property, 183 Main, and replace it with 2. So the original was townhouses and a 3-story apartment building.
Yes.
Then there is a reference in one Windsor Star article, which either could be from a quote from a meeting or could be misrepresented, but they say 2 4-story apartment buildings. Yep. So it's either one of those. Yep. You can say what it is. So that goes to council, and that ruffles feathers. So it's this point where people in the town
goose feathers
you could say goose feathers. So at this point, a petition is launched, and that petition generates 2,600 signatures.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this petition is also relevant because this is where it's kind of one of the seeds for a couple of the more popular Facebook groups in town.
Right. Yeah, they did gain relevance around that same time and issue.
Yes, and some of that petition rallying
helped gathering,
led into some of this.
Used as a method to gain signatures.
So basically, it gets put off at this point. So this is in 2019. So March 2020 is when it comes to the rezoning comes to council. And at this point, council instead votes to designate the property under the Ontario Heritage Act.
Mm-hmm.
And they rename it as the Esther Jasperson Campbell House. And that decision was almost unanimous, except for Deputy Mayor Gord Queen, who voted against it. And the reason, Deputy Mayor candidate Gord Queen, or I guess, Steve, what's the official call on that?
He's
current deputy mayor.
He's acting mayor.
So acting mayor.
However
we want to call it.
Okay.
Gord Queen.
Yeah.
Gord Queen.
So Gord votes against it, and here's why Gord votes against it. He says, and this is from Windsor Star article again, that he voted against it because it was an unprecedented move for the town to vote to request Ontario Heritage designation on a property that the property owner wasn't in favor of.
Mm-hmm.
Now, not unprecedented in Kingsville. Actually, it is unusual. The last time before that had happened, that the council determined, you know what, we have to designate this property as heritage. We don't care what you say, property owner. That's how important this building is. The only other building in Kingsville that's happened to.
The Bank of Montreal building uptown?
Not.
No?
Surprisingly.
You see the shape of that thing? It's got a dome. What? Does your bank have a dome? You bank at BMO, don't you?
Funny you say that, actually, because the building that it was is similarly shaped. It was the former Hiram Walker train station, now known as the Mettawas Station Restaurant.
Yep.
So Hiram Walker at the time didn't want them to designate it, but because that was of cultural significance, they did. So council deemed that the 183 Main was roughly the same cultural significance as the Kingsville train station. So that happens in 2020. So this is where
things are now unprecedented. Well,
we're getting not unprecedented, unusual.
Yes,
we're getting into the realm of unusual decisions being made. So now we're going to start talking about costs, because it's at this point when you start going against what a developer is asking for, you start racking up bills.
Now, before we get there, Kevin, how do we know that the costs that we will be speaking about are factual?
It's funny you should ask that, because we filed a Freedom of Information Act request, and here is exactly what we asked for. The request is regarding the Ontario Land Tribunal case number OLT 21001696, specifically to costs incurred by the town of Kingsville in preparation and during the most recent hearing held in July of 2022. So we're going to get to that. We request copies of all records, including but not limited to invoices to the town and by the town, submitted expense reports, overtime approvals, and any accounting of in-kind services related to preparations and participation in the above noted tribunal hearing. We further request correspondence, briefing notes, backgrounders, etc. between town staff and council members dated March 4th, 2021, and between March 4th, 2021 and March 30th, 2021. Those dates are significant. We'll talk about it. And between July 1st, 2022 and August 5th, 2022. Those dates also significant. And related costs or potential costs associated with the above noted tribunal hearing.
Thank you, Kevin.
So, because of the Freedom of Information Act, we were able to get some invoices that are significantly redacted.
As they should be.
As they should be because of solicitor-client privilege.
That's totally a thing.
Yeah.
It's totally a thing.
Which they are fully entitled to. And I would never, ever accuse them of withholding information that isn't.
Is the exact reason closed sessions of council exists.
Yep.
And there was no untowards of the use of closed sessions and any of our opinion on this.
Not at all.
And we did ask.
We did.
So the town spends roughly $10,000 here to get ready because now they're going to have to fight an appeal to the Ontario Heritage Act Tribunal because they've said, we deem your property is heritage. The property owner says no. They want to demolish it and build condo buildings. So then they launch an appeal. So now they have to start gathering information. So they hire a firm called Eternal Heritage Consulting. And October 23rd, they generated the Cultural Heritage Review Report. That cost the town $7,500.
Mm-hmm.
Again, all of these costs are less HST because the town doesn't pay HST.
Right.
So $7,500. And then November 8th, 2020, Eternal Heritage Consulting creates the Heritage Planning Review Report for 183 Main. That costs $2,500. So $10K so far because of that decision.
Yep.
So then we fast forward a year because I don't know if you guys know what happened in March of 2020, but the world stopped. So the case basically crawls at this point because you can't really do much over the pandemic.
Everything did.
So we'll fast forward to March of 2021 when the next significant council decision is made. And this is the one where, and I think the people collectively around this table will agree, that things really went sideways.
We did an episode all about this meeting.
This specific meeting.
Yeah, this was the one where you did some extensive research.
We found some precedents.
We did.
At this point, to remind our listeners / viewers, the developer plans to return to council and again request rezoning with an amended plan. This plan decides to keep the house and then proposes a 22-unit, 3-story condo in the rear of the property. And again, as we iterated in that episode, that 22 unit is a specific number because that's exactly the number of units that qualify under the town's official plan to be able to be on that amount of property.
Right.
The administration, and this is important, and Sebastian will get to this in a bit, administration recommends the plan. The planner says, this is a good plan. I recommend the council votes in favor.
It follows the
county official plan.
Right.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
And everything regarding densification for the property size.
And again, it's important to note here that the Esther Jasperson Campbell house is now being saved.
Yes.
Because they've determined that they're going to leave the house, sever it, and then build behind it. That is in line with the wording on the petition that 2,600 people signed, and also basically makes moot the $10,000 the town spent on heritage planning studies.
Yes.
So we, at this point, do our podcast a week prior to this meeting, and we say, council has to go against this. Yeah, there's a lot of people yelling and screaming, but at this point, the town has to go against this plan because, like we just said, there's already precedence that this has happened. The town of Uxbridge lost at the Ontario Land Tribunal over this almost exact same thing. It was townhomes, but it was literally a heritage building on the site. All of the unit sizes matched up. So, speaking before the meeting to AM 800, Councillor Laura Lucier, and these were the only comments I was able to find on the record. I looked at several different media sources, and there were no quotes other than this story on AM 800. Councillor Laura Lucier acknowledges a vote against the plan will likely mean that they'll be heading to what is now known as the Ontario Land Tribunal. She says, and this is a quote from the AM 800 story, "This developer isn't giving up and isn't going away. So if we don't approve this, they'll likely take this to LPAT, now the Ontario Land Tribunal, and LPAT will ultimately decide." So the vote happens, and council votes 4-3 to deny the rezoning request.
Correct.
And so the way that vote shook out, councillors Laura Lucier, Kim DeYoung, Tony Gaffin, and Larry Patterson vote to deny the zoning bylaw amendment. And councillors Thomas Neufeld and Deputy Mayor Gord Queen vote to approve the request. Mayor Nelson Santos abstains from voting. An abstention at that point is recorded as a nay. So technically it's a 4-3 vote. So the developer now is not allowed to amend the site plan, so they can't sever the house, and they're not allowed to rezone the property so that they can build the condo. So then in the summer of 2021, Brado Development submits an appeal to both the Ontario Land Tribunal over the denial of the rezoning and the Ontario Heritage Tribunal over the property designation at this point. So this is where the town decides, all right, so now we're going to have to hire, because now we have to go to the Ontario Land Tribunal. In the summer of 2021, they hire a planning consultant. So town spends $350 on another heritage review to get some technical advice. That's from Dan Schneider Heritage Consulting. They have a review and a phone discussion with him. Costs them $350. That's on October 30th, 2021.
Sounds like an hourly rate.
About that. Yeah, it's an hour and a quarter. It's an hour, 1.15 hours.
Hey, quick convo. Clarity.
Yeah, just wanted to get to it.
Hey.
So here's another milestone, November 2021. So March 2021, we have the vote. Then the Ontario Land Tribunal gets submitted. So now we're in November. And at this point, a preliminary hearing of the Land Tribunal is held. And they discuss how the case is going to move forward. So the developer announces his intention at this point to issue a summons for that town planner because, as we remember, he had recommended in favor of the zoning bylaw amendment.
Correct. Yep.
So the developer wants him to come in and basically make the case for him.
Yes.
So the town spends $13,072 on legal fees at this point. They hire a firm called Shillington McCall LLP. They get legal services. The legal services that they receive are redacted.
As they should be.
As they should be. But they spend, and the invoice total is there, it's $13,072. Again, that's minus HST. So with HST, it would be more.
So we're 24,000-ish?
Right.
Current to November 21, 24K.
So at this point, this is in November. So about around the end of November, they hold a closed session of council. Now, normally we wouldn't know what would happen in that closed session, but as part of our FOI, the town did make available that on November 22nd, 2021, for the purposes of discussion in relation to the matter of the records indexed, they can confirm that there are, so at that point, let me find out where. So the search did reveal a closed session meeting that was held. It does relate to the matter that we asked for, which is specifically costs.
Yes.
So I would assume, however, we can't say for sure, that somewhere in this closed session, they found out how much it was likely going to cost them.
We assume.
We assume. All we know is that at this point, there was a discussion about costs related to this tribunal hearing. To be able to have that meeting with their lawyer where they received information, the town spent another $778 on legal fees. That happened on November 29th, billed for that November 22nd meeting. Legal services rendered $778.73. Again, the contents of those services are redacted.
As they should be.
So now we're at about 30 G's-ish. Snowball. So then January of 2022 happens. Brado at this point decides to withdraw their appeal to the Ontario Heritage Act Tribunal, so that $15,000 they've spent so far on heritage planners up in smoke, because now that
was in the town. That was Brado.
Right. So
Correct.
Brado withdraws their appeal because they don't need to appeal anymore, because their development now would save the house. So the town spends at this meeting, or at this point, another $1,800 on their planning consultant. The date of that is January 14th. Poll Associate services rendered from October of 2021 to January 14th of 2022. So that is basically covering that preliminary hearing for the Ontario Land Tribunal. It also covers that meeting that they had, any review that they had at that November meeting, as well as January 2022. All right, here we go. So now we get to May of 2022. This past May.
Yes. No masks.
No
mask May.
No mask May. No.
It's a bit like no mow May.
Yeah, no mow May. So at the time when the town didn't want to spend any money on cutting grass, they did spend money on a heritage consultant again for a document review of $580 as they prepare their case.
Make sure everything's in order.
Get ready. So moving to July of 2022, the Ontario Land Tribunal is held. It's held. 5 days were set aside. It takes 2 days for them to present their case. So for the Ontario Land Tribunal, it cost them $119 with Purelator to transfer their discovery to the tribunal.
Delivery.
On July 8th.
Yes.
Then the tribunal was held, and then they paid their planning consultant on July 31st $9,400 to prep for the hearing and then attend that tribunal hearing.
$9,400.
So now we're at about $40,000. And then roughly a month later, which is fast for it wasn't even that. It was probably closer to 3 weeks, which is fast for the Ontario Land Tribunal.
Yes.
They decide in favor of the developer, as was expected back in March of 2021, granting the zoning bylaw amendment. And then basically it comes to an end.
Yes, which we did discuss.
The town now the developer is allowed to go ahead.
Yep.
The home is saved, exactly what they said in March. The property can be severed.
And the building for 22 units.
For 3 stories of 22 units can go forward.
Yes.
They can knock down the garage in the back.
Yep.
They can build a driveway next to it. They can knock down some trees. So, because, as you probably noticed, they didn't spend anything on legal fees over the last year. That's because the town hired a solicitor in their last budget.
Yes.
So the town solicitor spent roughly 210 hours on the file since March of 2021. That totals $16,000 in time spent by staff at the town of Kingsville.
Staff and solicitor.
Only solicitor.
Only solicitor.
They weren't able to come up with an estimate of overall staff time.
I suppose there wouldn't be.
Because
there would be a way to track it.
But the solicitor was able to say they felt comfortable that they spent roughly 210 hours on the case. That's a total of $16,000 more dollars. That's billed out at $76 per hour.
Kevin,
And I can tell you as the lawyer here on the panel today, that's the joys of having a town employee as a lawyer, because if you would have had to hire outside counsel to defend you there, that would have been between $275 and $500 an hour, depending on experience. And the city solicitor we have in the town of Kingsville is a very experienced woman who's very good at her job. So if we would have had to hire her in private practice, that's at least $400 or $500 an hour easy. So you could take that number and inflate it. If Mr. Norton hadn't been
able to acquire her talents,
which is I would say the only silver lining to this story.
So our total at this point, $52,350, and then if you add HST to that, $4,600. So for a grand total of $57,030 was spent fighting something that they knew was going to go to the tribunal anyway. And the planner had recommended that it be approved. And they decided instead to go against their planner's recommendation and take something to the Ontario Land Tribunal that they knew was going to go there.
Now, we as the podcast reached out to the councillors that voted against the approval and councillor
asking for comment
about this situation.
So that's councillors Laura Lucier,
Councillor Laura Lucier, Larry Patterson, Kim DeYoung, and Tony Gaffin. And the questions we asked were that why they voted against the recommendations of the municipal staff, and would they vote in the same manner today. And Tony Gaffin was the only responder to the request. It was a verbal conversation. He called and we had a discussion. And to the best of my recollection, again, there's no transcript, so I'm remembering this the best. He exclaimed that he was voting in line with the public opinion and what information he received. This is how the people he spoke with felt. So he was echoing their sentiment. So we did not receive at the time of this recording, which we tried to get beforehand today, any other comment from any of the others requested.
So 55 G's.
Okay, before we go into the money aspect, the other thing I look at there too is simply 210 hours of someone who Sebastian described as very experienced, very good at their job. So then before you break down the numbers of where this could have gone, what could we have done with 200 plus hours of an experienced solicitor? Like,
that's 5 solid weeks.
Right.
Broken up in little chunks all over that timeline.
No, that's
40 hours a week.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Sorry. My it's
okay.
Math brain is fried at the moment.
That's
However,
okay.
Yeah. So, there's always going to be cases and dockets, if you will, for lack of a better term. I probably don't call them dockets at the town, but
actually they were called dockets.
Yeah,
okay, situations.
Dockets.
She dockets her billable hours. That's what you have to do in order to track the amount of work that she does on a given file. It's very common in private practice and in public practice when you work in-house for a municipality.
So I guess what I'm getting at too is did this set back her workload ultimately?
I would assume so, right?
So,
if this is something that's done and there were other more prevalent issues that could have been.
Sure. So then I wonder if obviously some issues probably had to be dealt with in a timely manner. Was there overtime? So I don't know. Like,
there wasn't.
It would have been reported.
Okay.
We did ask.
Yes.
And also important to note,
Good to clarify that.
Yeah, there was no overtime. We did ask. We also did ask specifically whether or not for any correspondence between council and staff in relation to the costs that were incurred. There was no correspondence.
No documented correspondence.
No, you can say no correspondence because all correspondence in the municipality between a councillor and town staff has to be documented. Yeah. So there's no correspondence between a councillor and town staff where a councillor asked how much it was going to cost or a staff member told councillors how much it was going to cost.
Now, I understand, just going back to Tony's comment, I understand the voting in line with the public perception. What would have been interesting, and again, this is looking at it in hindsight, if had we known the cost, and the public perception was, no, please don't spend $54,000 on a losing cause, would that outweigh
but now
other public perception?
But now you're looking at it through hindsight.
I am. I know. And all I'm saying is can people be swayed that easily, if you will? And look, maybe I'm wrong throwing this out there, but you've got your legal advice, you've got your planner advice, and that's all, and then yet we're listening to the people. Now, there's a reason we didn't run. It's a thankless position at times, right? Being no. Like you're opening yourselves up to a barrage of
scrutiny,
exactly,
public persecution,
right? So, I wonder though.
Name calling. It is.
I get it. I get it.
It's dangerous.
You throw me off now.
Sorry, Steve.
Well, here's so the meeting in November. They received information from their solicitor, and at that time, costs were somehow discussed.
Yeah, we don't know the details.
We don't know the details.
Yeah.
But we can assume that the lawyer isn't just there talking about nothing, so he was providing legal advice.
Right.
We do know that there was discussions that happened. We received a redacted invoice for services. Yeah. So there were services offered to the town for legal advice in November. After that, they spent $25,000. So in November, when the lawyer is giving them advice and telling them something related to cost, they have still made the decision at that point to continue with the fight and continue to the land tribunal and spend another $25,000.
And I guess that's what I'm getting at, is that the public perception must have been extremely, extremely strong.
Now, Sebastian, if someone were to be running for council right now, what are some of the lessons that we can learn with regards to how that is such a slippery slope?
I think something that is really important for your listeners to understand, and hopefully if there are candidates who listen to this podcast as well, I hope they understand this as well. I think where our town has come from and where it's going to, and I mentioned this the last time I was on your podcast, is we're not a sleepy, small, little, boring hick town of 800 people anymore. There are large, complex land use and development issues that face this town. So, is it important to play politics when you're a politician? Absolutely. That's in the name of what you do, and your job is to convince people to like you enough to vote for you on election day and support you throughout your campaign and ensure that you are returned to the office, or that you start in an office that you want to be a member of. Great. Once you get there, you are a publicly elected official. At this point, I get that there are many people on Facebook groups and who meet you in the street, or who run into you while you're at work, or who run into you while you're out with your family, who say, I really don't want these things to happen. And it's very important for you to listen to that. And I totally get that. It's an important part of your role as a member of the community and as a publicly elected official. However, being a town councillor or a deputy mayor or a mayor, you are not a king or queen or duke or duchess of a kingdom or a fiefdom. There are clear laws and bylaws and regulations, the Planning Act, the Building Code, the Municipal Act, all the bylaws we have, all the zoning related laws that we have, and a full professional staff, a planner, a CAO, a chief financial officer, a city solicitor, a chief building official, all of whom's job it is to ensure that everything the town does is done in accordance with all these federal, provincial, regional, and municipal rules and regulations that exist. So to me, I think the important take home from this is this whole debacle is a learning lesson, I hope, for this town, for the community, that just because lots of people yell about something on Facebook doesn't mean that's what the town should do. Because it's very clear, and to me, I was a litigation lawyer at the beginning of my career before I became a small town solicitor. If the Ontario Land Tribunal sets aside 5 days to hear something and they're done in 2, that means you had a garbage case, which means the town had to go there because the town is a professional and they've now been instructed by their bosses, which is town council, to go and fight a losing battle. And you go there and the tribunal thinks, oh, well, clearly if they're fighting, there must be a really complex reason here, and we should set aside a lot of days. There's going to be a lot of testimony. This is going to get, intense. All you have to say as a developer's lawyer when you walk in is like, yeah, when we brought this bylaw proposal forward, the professional planner that is an employee of the town of Kingsville, whose job it is to make decisions and provide advice on this, said he liked the idea. I don't see where you go from there in an argument. It's kind of done at that point. And again, you see it in the bill. Their professional planning consultant that they paid to come there as their hired gun witness that was going to testify somehow in their favor wasn't cheap. I think he cost them $3,500 a day, because you said he cost $7,000 and it was a 2-day hearing.
No, it was $9,400.
Yeah, there you go. So take that and divide it by 2.
Meals and expenses.
Yeah, so that's what that guy charged.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, who's the tribunal going to believe? They're going to believe the guy who was the town planner, not, oh, here's some expert we hired who we've paid a lot of money to come here and give an expert opinion on what he or she thinks why potentially the town could be right. This is tilting at windmills. This is quite literally, they wasted 2 years of time fighting something that anyone with a basic, understanding of the Planning Act and their own planner, who was a professional planner, told them, don't bother. This isn't going anywhere.
Here's an interesting part. Remember what I said at the beginning? And I do want to get into what $55,000 gets you.
I was getting there. I'm segueing. Go on.
Do you remember when I said how the home was from a catalog from Bay City, Michigan?
I do.
And,
cover of the catalog.
And there's the cover of the catalog. And that is in the official description of why that town is designated on the Kingsville Heritage registry, and it was the key reason why it was designated to the Ontario Heritage Act, why the town wanted it to be designated that way, because you can only have, and the way that catalog in 1904 was written, you can only have one home like it in each municipality, and it's the only home like it in our region. So after the Ontario Heritage, Letourneau Heritage Consulting did a document review that the town paid for, they found that it actually isn't one of those catalog homes. The people who had put it forward that it was were mistaken. It's very close, but it's actually copied off of it. It's not actually one of those homes.
A forgery.
So,
Steve.
So they were going to lose at the Ontario Heritage Act tribunal hearing as well.
So I just want to reiterate, and I know we discussed this in a previous episode, but we have no skin in the game here.
No.
We have no opinion on whether what goes on as far as the development, the home, or anything like that. But I will state, and I guess the most frustrating part is simply, I understand where it all started with wanting to save the house. I understand the people who want to preserve those buildings. That's fine. It was done. Again, that was saved, and this all could have been avoided. And could we have done?
You could have saved it in 2017 and purchased it for $675,000.
And the only point I would make on that is, and this is one of the places where, and I think you mentioned it was current acting mayor Gord Queen and I think Thomas Neufeld who voted against the heritage designation, or was it?
They voted against denying the zoning bylaw amendment.
Oh, and then the heritage designation, when that went through council,
that was only Gord Queen.
Okay. So, and I think the one thing that Mr. Queen, who to his credit is a huge protector and champion of the heritage and the historical aspects of Kingsville. I mean, if you follow, the only things that man posts on Facebook are really interesting tidbits of history about the town of Kingsville. To his credit, I think what he got right in that hearing, which a lot of people are missing, is this is not what the Heritage Act was designed for. Absolutely, can a municipality force designation against the will of a property owner? Absolutely, they can. The question is, should they? And does that make sense? If all the people who wanted to save that home had all raised $1,000 a person, they could have bought that house and made it their own private clubhouse. That the reality is it fair to the owner of a property that your wishes or dreams or goals for that property be hijacked because several angry people in the community don't like multi-story buildings? And that's, I'm not going to answer that question, but it's a question that needs to be asked. Because if we live in a society where we believe in property rights and where we believe the owners of properties within reason have rights to do what they wish to do with their own properties, and if we have a government that's been screaming at us for the last 10 years that we don't have enough high density housing, and it's right in the official plan that that's what we need and want
in the heart of town,
and we're trying to save a house that, let's not kid ourselves, was cut up inside to turn into a bed and breakfast and was not in the original condition it was back in 19-whatever when it was built. Is it really a heritage house? Or is it something where the Heritage Society could have built a beautiful plaque and a monument that would have discussed the history of that property and what stood there before and how important it was to honor that legacy, and force the subsequent developer to say, I want a bench and a plaque and a little garden that says, here stood this, and here's why it was significant to our town. And these are things where, is it government's job to fix this problem? Or is it something where the community could have solved this problem themselves? Because let's not kid ourselves, that house has been sitting vacant now since, how many years are we now into this?
Oh, since at least, 2017?
It sold in 2017.
Yeah. So
a
good old fiver on you.
So what is the condition of that house right now? And how realistic is it going to be that that house is ever going to be used for anything meaningful ever again?
Well, that does raise an interesting point about the future of that domicile. Since it is now designated heritage, it now has certain stipulations.
It's not. It's on the Kingsville Heritage Registry, but it's not designated as a heritage site.
I stand corrected. Yeah. So anyhow,
but it still
does.
There are still stipulations that come with being on the registry,
correct.
and you any buyer of that property is going to be under immense public pressure to like, I wouldn't want to be the person that bought that property, because you're gonna. Because then what happens if you go cut a couple trees down? Mm-hmm. Do you have a 2,600 person petition against you then?
Or put different colored trimmed windows in it than there was originally, right? So reviewing 57,000.
So here's how we got to that.
57,000, yes.
Yes, 57,000 with HST. So let's call it 55.
55.
Let's call it 55.
Nice round.
How we got there, again, $16,000 in staff time, legal fees, solicitor fees. Then they paid outside counsel $13,851. They paid a planning consultant a total of $11,464. They paid one heritage consultant $10,580. They paid another heritage consultant $350, and they used Purolator to ship something to Toronto. That was actually also redacted, strangely, for $105. There's a couple of redactions in here that I do actually have questions about, but we won't get into it because it doesn't matter.
It's not that pertinent.
So that adds up to 55 G's.
And some would say that was a good 55,000 spent.
Some would.
Some would say, yes, you know what? This was an initiative we needed to go down that road.
And some would say, looking at a multi-million-dollar budget, that $55,000 is just a drop in the hat.
Drop in the hat. But
so here,
is it?
That's weird. So 2.3% tax increase. The 0.3% is $55,000.
Say what?
So last year, council budget 2.3% tax increase. They argued over that tax increase for 3 days. 0.3 of that went straight to this. That's $6.65 for every household in this town. So instead of getting 3 coffees,
half a dozen donuts,
you paid to fight this losing battle.
Is that half a dozen donuts? Is it? I don't know.
I don't know anymore.
I don't eat them by the dozen anymore. That was a younger Dave.
So
it was the jelly donuts from the bakery downtown that were delicious.
Yeah.
Like way back when. It's like grade 6. Those were awesome.
Or it's like a Starbucks coffee and a half. So
or half a Starbucks.
Remember in May when everyone hated the grass?
Yeah.
Like the grass was like a foot long.
Yeah.
Well, this is the entire grass cutting budget.
Still trying to find my dog.
Say that again.
The entire grass cutting budget for the entire municipality, including all parks, is $40,000.
Oh.
So this is $10,000 more.
So they could have recut the grass a couple of more times.
If you wanted paved paths in Ridgeview Park, because Steve loves paved paths, this is the cost to do it.
It's no wonder I get ornery.
Yeah, he does. He does it just to get you.
Let's say you have a small playground near your house, and you think, man, that small playground could use some new equipment. This is the cost to tear that equipment down and replace it.
$55,000?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh.
Yep. This is 10 times the tree planting budget for the entire town.
10 times. Now, what is the tree planting of the town? How many trees do we plant for a tenth of that?
Not many, but they could plant 10 times more.
Jeez. Okay, let's leave that one alone.
Oh! Are you not even going to?
No.
Just needling it right in there. So this, and I actually really like this one. So all of the revenue that the planning department is going to generate or is expected to generate this year.
How does that happen?
Through fees, through different planning fees. If someone's going to submit documents, they need to be reviewed. That's a fee. Yep. Building permits,
demolition fees. All of it.
So half of all of those fees going to this.
Oh,
right off the bat.
Oh,
the budgeted amount.
Mm-hmm.
This is twice the budgeted amount for that new programming and events assistant position. Yeah. You could have hired 2 of them.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, could have hired 3 because they already hired 1 and then they spent twice that on this. So they could have hired 3 of them or made that person full-time. More than the total cost to the town of the Heritage Games, Migration Festival, and the Fantasy of Lights combined.
These are some pretty
Heritage Festival's coming up. Yeah. Wouldn't it be nice? Migration Festival, yes. Wouldn't it be nice to have that a little bit bigger, expand it? Can't. Spent all of the money that you spent on festivals on fighting a losing battle. I don't know what
you have to take a look back at it and understand how the whole scenario went way beyond what anyone could have imagined. And we discussed it, right? And our analysis of, at a certain standpoint, there is no legitimate way why this should be denied, and it was. And as Sebastian mentioned, it's an incredibly slippery slope when that kind of a precedent or that kind of an action takes place. And I'm hoping that this lesson is learned through this set of scenario occurrences and what the outcome was, that we understand that these actions have implications that have costs associated to them. These aren't just things that get resolved without an action or an offset somewhere.
Well, exactly. Like, I think to take anything away from this, it's the fact that you need to have counselors in place that are willing to go against the loud, screaming residents that are calling for their heads, because it was vicious. It was vicious. That meeting was that back in March of 2021 when they had to make that decision. It was tough.
Yeah, it was no secret. We discussed, occurrences.
Yeah, and that was when those Facebook groups that were clamoring were really getting going. Like, that was the height of that, and it's tough. Like, it's tough. That's a lot of money. $50,000 is a lot of money.
And I think one of the things that I hope, again, the candidates that are running this time understand, and is important to understand, just because you're a town councillor or you're an elected official doesn't automatically make you an expert on all of these things. And that's why the town hires administration. So I don't change my own oil. I know that's embarrassing. I don't do my own dental surgery. I wouldn't take out my own appendix because I read a Google article. I think it's important to understand that these people we vote in out of the community aren't professional planners. They aren't engineers. They aren't municipal lawyers. They aren't land use experts. And I think the easiest argument to when people start yelling at you about something they want is to say, well, why don't we ask an expert? And what's clear in this case, as it was in the development I came and spoke to you about the last time, the medical building, is council felt for a second time that it was a good idea to ignore the advice of people who studied this stuff at university, who are licensed professionals in this area, who pay insurance and licensing fees every year in order to provide opinions on these areas. And it's easy to turn around and say, yes, but I did what the people wanted. And I've seen this in a lot of the advertising for a lot of the candidates. But that's not your job. Once you get in the office, your job is to carry out the rules, regulations, bylaws, and laws that impact the community of the town of Kingsville. It's not just, well, I'm just going to bury my head in the sand and do it anyway. Because
they also have the ability to change those, but there is a protocol and procedure in order to do so. That's the function.
On the flip side of it too, I wonder, as a member of administration or staff, what does that do to my morale? Oh. Here I am offering my opinion, and it's essentially not valued. My expertise, like this is how it is. I'm telling you straight up, this is how it is. And they turn around and say, "Okay, thanks, but you know what? No,
we're gonna do our own thing."
Yeah.
And I think it's a very difficult situation given the climate and the atmosphere over that period of time. Like we've never seen this kind of an outlash in that environment within society, right? It's very polarizing and changing now that there's so many different methods of contact and broadcasting. We're one of them. I'm not even going to. Podcasting is relatively new. We have a bunch of people that watch the right side of my fat face and listen to what we have to say. It's a matter of are individuals taking what's being said and what's broadcast and understanding how they can react or act upon it. We are not professional podcasters. You are the professional at the table, Mr. Schmoranz.
Which is terrifying. And I think, but if we're going to end or if we're going to move towards a positive way of solving this problem, and I had a conversation a week or two ago with a colleague of mine who was a former council member of Amherstburg Town Council, and he teased me a little bit about how the town had been embarrassed by this loss of the Ontario Land Tribunal, and he said it's a planning failure. And the way you solve this, and this is something Town Council in Kingsville has been hesitant to do for decades, this is why you establish long-term official plans. Because the perfect example is if you look at Amherstburg, if you look at Sandwich Street or Dalhousie Street, that the beautiful old heritage part downtown where all the restaurants and boutiques and shops are now, and where they've now built a new condo development down by Riverside. What council smartly did several years ago is they adopted an official plan that had a very, very, very long term that said in advance, we permit all of these types of uses for these types of properties. So every time somebody bought a house and wanted to turn it into a restaurant or a high-end kitchenware store, they didn't have to go to council every single time. And the problem is that we have in Kingsville, and that's, I think, why we have this really dangerously overheated political public rhetoric, is because we've never bothered to put a really comprehensive plan in place. Every single usage change becomes a political football, and every single usage change has to go in front of a council meeting, which gives Facebook groups time to yell and scream and show up at meetings and
rallies and events.
Yeah, and look, you're a town councillor. Let's not kid ourselves. It's essentially a volunteer position. You're getting paid almost nothing to do this. Like if I show up and there's a bunch of angry people yelling at me, Sebastian, you better decide X. I'm going to decide X. I mean, like, well, I don't have any skin in the game. I'm not getting paid to do this. Like this isn't like I'm getting paid $125,000 a year to make decisions about where the veterans parking is going to go. Like this is, you do this out of the goodness of your heart and the love of the community that you have. But what I'm saying is the easy solution for those candidates that are listening, put in place hire a great planning consultant, come up with a really comprehensive land use plan for the next 25, 30 years so that every time this happens, because let's not kid ourselves, this is a multi-residential development in the middle of town, exactly where those things should go, as both the provincial, federal, and regional governments have told us that they should. Why does this need to go to council for approval? If you had a proper plan in place that said, of course, anything off of Main Street between whatever, Zares and King's Convenience can be redeveloped into multi-residential. Like, of course it can. Mm-hmm. Why does this need to be a giant political football where we show up with pitchforks and torches and everyone says, I love this house and I don't want this and I don't want that, but the neighbor doesn't like this and, the building's too tall and I don't like how it looks. it takes all the pressure off of council, who really, and I'm not saying this to be mean, isn't qualified to make this decision. They're not. That's why they have a planner. It's why they have a chief building official. It's why they have engineers and lawyers.
Yeah, exactly. It's the public at large.
Yeah. And the public is a scary thing. And that's the hardest thing about being a politician. And there's certain decisions that can be absolutely political and can be absolutely, what does everybody think we should do? I.e., should we adopt the salute to veterans banners that we hang up and down Main Street on lampposts? There's no wrong answer to that question.
Well, and I think the thing that, and the reason that we dug into this one so much is because the way to solve or fix this from happening, like you said, is adopt an official plan that says you can't do it. If you don't want stuff to happen somewhere, then try to pass an official plan that says you can't do it. It'll probably won't pass because it's not in line with the Provincial Planning Act. But if that's the way you want to go, if you don't want 6-story buildings in town, then pass a policy that says you can't go over 3 stories.
Huh. And there was the Main Street Development Recommendation Committee that went out there, and as I want to say, it was a direct result of what was transpiring with this property. And there was.
Do you know anyone that was on it?
I don't. This is the long-term joke. Just Sebastian, if you're not regular, I was on committees.
Dave, you sat on committees?
I sat on committees.
You didn't wear that nice blazer. You didn't wear those nice blazers on that committee,
though. On occasion when I had a late meeting. Anyhow, there was a method to collect some of this information. Whether or not the council would act upon it, that's arbitrary to them. That's their decision. Yeah. It's a matter of that committee collected information around several different factors and features about the way that we as that committee envisioned the future of that portion of town. And it had limitations. There were strict limitations. We only talked about a certain part of town, and we developed it or talked about it in quadrants. Yes, 4.
Yeah,
quadrants. And that was the
forewarned weather.
We gave a report and a recommendation, and whether or not council wanted to act on it, create bylaws around it, discuss further requirements, stipulations, legitimacy towards the Planning Act. That was their fruit and their food to do so.
And instead, you had a council that enacted a moratorium on all development in the downtown core. Which again, and this is something I tried to make this point with the medical building discussion several months ago. These are large multi-million-dollar developments. These are large investments by large players who, if you suddenly say, oh, the place where you're absolutely allowed to build the thing that you're absolutely allowed to build, we're just going to arbitrarily say no. If you think that doesn't hurt their wallet and they're not going to fight that, then you're naive. I mean, the answer quite simply is you can't just panic and say, we don't allow any development anymore. This is clearly the canary in the coal mine of, guys, let's come up with a plan. Like, my favorite thing is I see several candidates, also, former incumbents on council now, saying we need more affordable housing and we need more apartment living. You have 9 dozen. You've had like dozens of proposals over the last several years for high density housing. Oh, but the market price is so high and the rent price is so high. Well, there's 2 very simple solutions to that. Either A, put more supply in the market so the rent price goes down, or B, hey, council, you can actually pass affordable housing bylaws. There are giant grant programs provided by the province and the region where you can tell the developer, I'm going to permit you to build this apartment building. It's going to be affordable housing, and we will help subsidize for you the cost of building it so that you can build it cheaply enough. But then we will set the rent you're allowed to charge, or we will provide incentives for you to charge rent at a certain level.
For a certain stipulated amount of time.
Called proactive planning and land use. Because I think what this council failed to understand, and previous councils in this town, because we've had this mentality for a while. Look at what happened to Harrow. Look at what happened to Leamington. Harrow is only now just digging out from decades of stagnation because everyone was a NIMBY and everyone said, I don't want change. No, 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 no. And everyone left, and they had a hollowed out downtown core. They then very smartly for the last several years gave giant grants to any developer who wanted to come to demolish and or redevelop buildings so that their downtown core wouldn't become a ghost town.
Yeah.
Look at Leamington. Leamington is a classic planning year 1. You learn about urban sprawl and why it's bad. That is Leamington. Leamington is urban sprawl with greenhouses on one side and big box stores on the other, because nobody thought in advance, shouldn't we maybe decide where the greenhouses can go? And maybe shouldn't we promote people putting services in the downtown core so that now where all the big box stores are could be residential development instead of a Walmart and a 9,000 other things? And this is, like, we're going down this path, guys. And that the alarm I'm trying to sound is, we have a fantastic CAO now. We have a fantastic city solicitor. We have a great planner. We have a great chief building official. We have all the right tools in the administration of this town now to make really good decisions about the future of this town. What I hope for is that we get a council and a deputy mayor and a mayor who have the wherewithal to understand maybe we should ask a professional for advice, and maybe we should do what they tell us to do. And maybe when they say, you know, don't just say no to the developer, say no, but if you do these 3 things, we'll say yes. Then it makes it easier for you to put your stamp on how development happens, rather than just saying no and having development forced on you by the Ontario Land Tribunal or the Superior Court of Ontario.
And maybe say, I'm sorry, residents, but unfortunately, this isn't a decision I'm able to make.
And it's an easy thing to say, and I don't understand why no one thought to say it. To say, I'm sorry that you're unhappy that this development is happening. It's permitted to happen, and it's something that we are encouraging to happen because we desperately need high density housing. A. B. If you don't like how it looks, totally understand. We can pass bylaws that deal with what type of, cladding and what type of architectural design we want for buildings that come into our community. That was my favorite thing about the medical building issue. They hated how it looked. And now look at the buildings next to the high school are very modern looking condo buildings. So medical building has a very nice New Englandy kind of look to it. And we have on the other side of Migration Hall, very modern looking. So clearly it's not about look. It's just about not wanting change. And the problem is change is going to happen. Mm-hmm. So either you can help shape change or you can have change forced upon you. And this is a classic, this development here with the Jasperson House is a classic example of having change forced upon you. Council is going to be very hesitant to fight them on anything else going forward because they know they got slapped down once. They're going to get slapped down again and again if it goes back to Land Tribunal. Because the Land Tribunal is going to say, guys, you didn't listen to us the first time. We made it clear they can do this. And now they're going to do it.
Now that medical building roof does seem absolutely monstrous. Like absolutely monstrous.
But again, building heights are in the zoning bylaws. If you don't like building heights.
And we'll notice too that the condos are going up very quickly behind that. So, I'm waiting to hear when people start barking about, I didn't know that there were these buildings that were going to be erected, which again is very old news.
Look at the roof line on the Royal Oak long-term care facility on Division. It's the same height as the one on Main Street, and it backs directly onto a residential neighborhood. Mm-hmm. Huh. Oh, but it casts a shadow. Yeah. Mm.
Shadows.
Yeah. Well, again, to echo Sebastian's comments and what we discussed, the lessons are there. It's whether or not the council to be elected understands how to proceed, what we can do and what we cannot do, and what is right for the town. And I'm optimistic that, hey, maybe even some of the people that voted against this learned the lesson the hard way and can make a better decision going forward. It's not to say that those individuals that voted this way will vote that way all the time. That's not what we're saying.
I wish they had told us. I do wish they had to provide a comment. Because it would be. I actually just as a voter would like to know the answer to that question.
I'm optimistic. I'm thinking that everyone wants to do right in this world, and it's a matter of that was their opinion at that time. And I'm hopeful personally, Dave, non-professional podcaster, that given the data, given the outcome, given the circumstances, again, we could have planted 10 times more trees, folks.
Yep. 10
times more trees, right? There are things that, and I'll make the comment as well. We do have a portion in the budget for legal costs. That is a budgeted item in our town of Kingsville budget. It is not just it.
Not that I could find.
Is it carte blanche?
Well, generally it would come from reserves or come from general taxation, but it's not specifically earmarked for fighting lawsuits.
Right. So
It could just as easily go to pay for more trees. It could just as easily buy a new playground. That's just unearmarked funds.
Right. So
it's not just sitting there waiting for the next lawsuit.
Right. And we're not, and thank you for making the point.
Sorry.
No, that's what I wanted you to
see. You should have red carded me.
But that's what I want you to understand. Is it's not a matter of this was money that was going to be spent towards legal costs anyway. It's a matter of these funds now got allocated towards something that might not necessarily have been that way in the outcome.
And to many of the candidates' credit, I'm seeing a lot of posting about people wanting to do longer term planning for the town in terms of zoning and bylaws and land usage. And that's, to me, that's a great sign, because that helps prevent these types of situations from happening ever again.
Hey, you're a business owner in town, right? You're a business owner on Main Street in town. Like, what do you see? How do you like? What's happening with McGregor Sims Schmoranz with regards to when things like this happen? How do you feel about this?
Well, it's money we can spend on other things. I mean, look at legal battles. I'll give you a perfect example of something we could have saved this money for. Whether people agree with it or disagree with it, and I'm not going to comment on it one way or the other. The lighting bylaws for greenhouses. That's going to go to court at some point, whether they take the town of Leamington to court over it or they take the town of Kingsville to court over it, because you're trying to regulate an industry that has regulations that are, brought down by the province on them.
They're going to lose. They're going to lose.
I'm not commenting on it, but what I'm saying is
they'll lose. Because and
by they, do you mean the greenhouse growers or do you mean the town?
Yeah, no, you can't have a bylaw that regulates something that's already regulated by the Normal Farm Practices Board. If you don't like something happening on a farm, it's agriculturally zoned, then you complain to them, not the town. The town can't say, I don't like the smell of that. I'll turn off your corn popper. Stop being so stinky, mushroom farm. Like, the town doesn't have that ability, and they don't have the ability to govern light from those.
But so that comment aside, which is a valuable comment, but that's the argument that's going to happen in a courtroom at some point. And the point I'm making is, if we're going to spend as a town, if taxpayers are going to spend money on the town fighting things that they think they have the right to fight, which there is an argument to spend money on consultants and lobbyists and lawyers to say, no, so we might lose in court over this bylaw, but then we need to go to this Farm Standards Board, or we need to lobby several levels of government in order to give the municipalities back a certain amount of control over agricultural activities, whether I agree with it or not.
Right.
The point is, can't we all agree that that's a better thing to spend town legal money on than fighting one individual property on one individual development for 3 years on something where 3 years ago a town professional said, don't waste your time? And all I'm saying is that's what a city solicitor is for, is fighting the big fights, providing policy on new bylaws, new zoning things, dealing with potential threatened lawsuits and lobbying for things and hoping to make new legislation on things, not, well, so-and-so doesn't like this development, so now we got to go fight this nonsense.
Or spending 5 weeks coming up with language so that what they were trying to achieve here can be achieved. Because that's the point of a town solicitor.
Absolutely.
And in 5 weeks, they can probably sit there, and I don't want to speak for Ms. Hirota and her time allocation, but I'm sure if she had nothing else on her plate for 5 solid weeks, she could probably come up with some form of argument to say, you know what, for developments moving forward, here's how we decide that this can't happen and this can't happen and this size limit and this story limit.
And I could say I would much rather see a line item on our budget for $500,000 that says we hired a proper consulting and planning company and said, let's give us a 35, 40-year plan for the town of Kingsville, Ruthven, and Cottam that says, here's how we grow out into the future. Let's do all the demographic and statistical studies and be done with it. I'll happily double you said it was what, $6 a taxpayer for 50,000. So if we're at 500,000, then it's $60. I'll pay $60 to make that happen happily.
Yeah,
it's what, 3 large pizzas from OG Pizza?
Oh,
so looking for your next sponsor, guys. I'm trying to help you.
King size pizza. Hey, OG Pizza already gets free plugs because I want a free pizza. So it's delicious. But yeah, it's a matter of there are so many different things that are going to happen that are going to shape Kingsville in the next coming couple of years. And if we don't get a grasp on what's important and what we need to dictate or how we can shape, that, then we could be Leamington 2.0, right? Remember, it was voted best place to live in Canada, right?
Money Sense Magazine, 2006.
And it fell from grace incredibly quickly. And I think that's because, they took their hands off the wheel and allowed big box store after big box store to take prime residential and other use developed properties and lands, and didn't think that would have a negative effect on the downtown core, which is the heartbeat of a town. And I've
losing middle-class hundreds of middle-class jobs at Hines didn't help that either.
No, it didn't. No, it didn't.
A separate issue, but definitely caused problems. But I think, and the other thing that I think that people take home is the answer can't just be no to everything.
Yeah.
It can be no, but it can't just be no.
Well, are these some of the, without speaking about specifics, in your firm, are you seeing less and less of this type of case come through, or this kind of client come through?
I've made it to the point where, quite frankly, I just referred out to firms in the bigger cities because I still got to shop at the same grocery stores as everybody else, and I don't want anybody spitting on my apples as I take them through the checkout. But my
shop at Leah Maria's wouldn't happen.
The freshest apples,
the freshest, spit free since when did you guys start?
1978.
Spit free since 1978. There you
shine
go.
Up that apple.
No, look. My view is this. This isn't
spit free since 79.
And I sound like a broken record, but I said this when I was here last time too. These disputes aren't my neighbor Joe is building a pool shed and I don't like it. I'm going to go to council. We're going to fight about neighbor Joe and his pool shed. These are large, complex decisions. And there is sometimes no right and wrong answer. There's sometimes a weird middle position that takes lots of experts to come up with an answer to. And this isn't going away. The town's growing rapidly. We have lots of new development. We have lots of new types of industries that are moving into this area. Once the second bridge span gets built and Highway 3 is twinned all the way down, and we've got our battery electric EV plant, and we've got another shift running, and who knows what other car parts companies coming down. Going to be all sorts of other different land use issues. I mean, we live in a town where we still don't have sewers all the way up to the second concession on Division. And why is that? It's very simple, because the town was run the same way for years. Keep property taxes as low as possible, which is great. And it's a great thing to run on. They've done it very successfully. But you get what you pay for. And if the answer to everything is, well, we don't have a budget for that, and the answer is no, and well, we can't do it, and well, we don't have the infrastructure, and well, we can't afford the infrastructure, or well, we're 30 years behind in planning for the infrastructure because no one thought to plan for it, or we never put money in the budget to pay someone to help us plan for it, then you end up with this, right? And I say, look at Harrow. Harrow's a perfect example. They're only now beginning their rebirth. They have a beautiful streetscape that they spend a ton of money on. They went to every developer on the face of the earth and said, please, God, come to Harrow. What can we do? How can we incentivize you to create jobs and improve infrastructure and replace things? Because it can't just be government that has to replace these things. You need partnerships with industry. But letting certain angry interest groups in the town dictate policy means people start saying, well, why would I invest here? And, these are short-sighted wins that lead to long-term problems. And that's where, if you have proper professional staff, if you have counselors that can be humble and say, just like on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, can I ask an expert? And then make a good decision and stand by it and say, yeah, I know a lot of people aren't happy with this, but my job isn't to be your friend. My job is to govern this community.
Would you phone a friend?
I would absolutely phone a friend. I phone a friend.
Tell them sorry.
Can't happen.
Can't happen.
Well, guys, as far as I'm concerned, we have nothing more to speak about unless there's some severe changes on 183, right? That was the idea of this episode, was to wrap it up, have Sebastian come in, provide us with a legal opinion based upon certain things that can and cannot happen and what people can and cannot do. So it's not just the Three Stooges talking about it. It's a matter of, yeah, we've got opinions and whatnot, but just because we're not qualified doesn't mean that we can't be right.
Yeah.
So,
and I think we covered why it matters.
Correct.
Because that's the key. It's not the 50 G's matters, but
not really.
But really, it's why that decision, why it was a bad decision, what could have been, what could have changed, the money that could have been saved, and really like what that money could have been used for instead, because it's not insignificant. $50,000 is $50,000.
I hate telling my kids, no, you can't do certain things, but sometimes that's the lesson.
Sometimes
they
that's
learn. So I'm optimistic going forward. I'm hopeful that this is precedent setting for future council members and mayors and deputy mayors as to this is what happens, as Sebastian said, when you don't listen to the experts.
Yeah.
So, all right, Sebastian, what's happening around McGregor Sims Schmoranz in Kingsville?
All right, I'm trying to think. What was the date? When was I last here? This was over a year ago now.
About a year.
2 years ago.
Yeah.
Year and a half. I can't.
Year
so
and a half?
the whole COVID time to me could have been 80 years or 3 minutes. I've lost all concept of time. So since we last met, so McGregor Sims Schmoranz still has the Kingsville location. We have acquired another firm in Harrow, the Golden Law Office. So Peggy Golden and I are working together to make sure we continue to provide fantastic legal services to everyone in the Harrow, Colchester, McGregor, Essex, West Kingsville area. We've now grown to a firm of 5 lawyers and 6 staff spread out over 2 offices. We do wills and estates, real estate deals, corporate commercial work, that kind of stuff. We're actually starting to branch out into mediation. My law partner, Amy Lynn, and I have recently started the process of becoming certified as mediators. Mediation's an interesting field because a lot of litigation work is now the courts, to deal with the backlog of litigation files, are now forcing that parties go through mandatory mediation on every matter. It's primarily useful for us. We're doing largely real estate and estates mediation. So grandpa dies, leaves $1 bajillion to 9 siblings who all hate each other, and now no one can get along and agree. It's become a very valuable area to provide services in, to say, let's resolve this family dispute and, honor grandpa's wishes and move on with our lives. And then on the horizon, we purchased, my wife and I purchased the Harrow Antique Store building in Harrow almost a year ago now, in November of last year, which, if you know Harrow at all, is the building that was right at the end of the T intersection on Main Street, which is called King Street in Harrow. Building was torn down. We are rebuilding it currently. It is going to become a 2-story, 10,000 square foot building. We will be moving the Golden Law Office into that building once it's ready, and my wife will be opening a brand new dental office in Harrow in the hopes of serving the growing community in Harrow, but also a lot of the people in Kingsville who are finding it hard to get timely appointments with their dentists, because Kingsville is growing so rapidly that a lot of the dental offices are getting to the point now where it takes you a couple months to get in to see someone. And with all the residential development that's happening out towards Kingsville Golf Course, obviously that community is arguably just as easy for them to drive to Harrow as it is to drive through town. So those are the things on the horizon. So my hope is by spring of 2023, we'll be in our new office in Harrow. We'll still maintain the Kingsville office as well. There will always be 2 locations. And we're actually hoping to do our grand opening over the Harrow Fair weekend next year. And we'll try and host a block party behind the new building. And maybe that Kingsville podcast wants to come out and
get cows.
And get cows. You just want to get cows.
No, get cows to be at the party.
We could work on that. I do have some agricultural clients that I could maybe ask to bring some
Bossy Bingo
for decoration.
Bossy Bingo.
Yes.
Wasn't Bossy Bingo outlawed? I don't know. I didn't make it.
Was it really?
I didn't make it to Harrow Fair. I'm sorry.
What?
You got to go to the Sun Parlor Rodeo and watch the Bossy Bingo. That is the most entertaining. If they had that on TSN 3, I would watch that.
The Ocho.
Moving on.
To me, that's the best sport to bet on.
And I thank you, Sebastian. Thank you for your time and being here and offering the services.
As I mentioned, private practice lawyers bill at a much higher hourly rate, so you guys will be getting a very large bill at the end of this.
So not $76.
No, that's 70. I didn't even bill that when I was an articling student. So that's yikes.
Steve, lastly but not leastly,
What's up?
You've finished your coaching of the Kingsville Public School girls soccer team.
Yeah, it's been 10 years since I've coached that level, and I had a blast.
Yeah, no, and my youngest daughter, was on the team to Steve's prompting. He encouraged her to go and play, and she and Steve's daughter was on the team as well. She also encouraged her to play, a couple of her other friends, and from what I saw, a great job at working with the children who, because of COVID, did not have organized sports, doing the best that you could do with what you were given.
I appreciate that. And there, you know what, there were many girls. Most of the team had either never played or hadn't played since they were, 4, 5, 6 years old. So it was a very steep learning curve. Mm-hmm. We didn't win a game. We hardly scored a goal. But you know what? I like to think, and it is noticeable that they were better players after 12 games than they were at the start. No tears, lots of smiles. Mm-hmm. That's just me. But no, it was a lot of fun. And speaking of like kids, I see Kevin's daughter Mia had quite an experience recently at a concert.
What? Oh my gosh. So
the birthday.
Oh no, I didn't know we were going to talk about it. Yeah.
Oh no, we gotta.
Yeah. So a couple of notes on sports first. Okay. Rowan Colasandi won the grade 3 cross country for across Windsor Essex.
Nice. That's Ashley's son?
That's Ashley's son, okay. Yep. My Sebastian was about middle of the pack.
I love when you call me my Sebastian.
And I thought you would have done better. You could have completely.
You thought I could have run faster than grade 3s. Man,
who knew?
You got to go back to reffing.
Seng's martial arts in town at the London Open Jiu-Jitsu tournament came in. Their academy came second at the London Open.
They do a great job there.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
And so we went to Detroit. So for my daughter's communion, we got her tickets to see her favorite artist, who happens to be from
Slayer.
Norway.
Oh no way!
Yeah,
Slayer, Norwegian metal band,
Norwegian
death metal.
Yeah.
How old is she?
Loves Norwegian death metal. The artist's name is Sigrid. And
the artist name's a secret?
No. Sigrid.
I don't get a honk for that. I didn't get on.
No, you're not
get a honk.
You're guest on the
There's
show.
Your honorary honk.
Nelson was the only one that got honks.
Anyway, yeah.
You guys.
So we ended up.
Sigrid, yes.
So
your fees just went down.
Yeah.
Just so we were making that clear. Sorry.
Now you're paying us. So we go to the concert. It actually was supposed to be at the Majestic. It ends up at a smaller venue called the L Club in Mexican Town, which was fantastic.
Yeah.
Like 400 people. It was weirdly set up where there was a wall down the middle, so it separated the concert space from the bar space. So there was commingling, which was great for the show because people are just kind of there, and then the people are off like getting their drinks. It was often so it was great. And my 9-year-old was happy that they were serving booze, so that was good for her. And
my dad were as well.
And so we got up right up at the front, and she was having a conversation with her favorite artist of all time. Sigrid. S-I-G-R-I-D.
Sigrid.
Yeah, Sigrid. So yeah, it was she was over the moon. It was fantastic.
Kevin,
it was a great time.
You're giving your children far too many substantial events early on in life.
I know.
You have to build these things.
You got nowhere to go from here.
No.
I was gonna say, they're gonna hit their 20s and be like, oh,
what? This is the
socks?
next concert.
Socks? Really,
I had
Dad?
Slayer play in my backyard again. Meeting her favorite artist at the concert she goes to by chance follows the time I took her to her first Blue Jays game, where she meets Jordan Romano and gets a signed baseball, and then the guy behind us catches a foul ball, hands it to her, and then she ends up on the Jumbotron. Mm-hmm. That doesn't happen. No, wow. That's not normal. That's not. And
you should start saving for the therapy she's going to need now. Because it's the rest of her life's going to be a letdown now.
Thank the guy upstairs, because for whatever reason he is looking out for her for these events, and it was the only time a foul ball's ever been near me. And
you should have her blow on your Lotto Max ticket this week for good luck.
Yeah.
70
bajillion.
That's what I got to do on the way home then.
I already did it. Well, I was in Toronto. I bought a ticket in Toronto, guys.
Well, and hopefully it brings luck.
Because everybody, well, I don't, the Blue Jays aside, but everybody who wins the lottery is from Toronto.
Are you kidding? There's tons of people down here that win the lottery.
No, they don't.
Like a ridiculous number of people here win the lottery.
Windsor. Well, it's usually the Encore. Never the big prize, but still.
But yeah, you always hear it's like,
the awarded ticket was at the GTA.
Well, yeah.
But that's half of Ontario.
Right. And I bought a ticket there, so when I win,
you're one of the millions of people who
remember us.
Great job.
When you leave the podcast.
Yeah, exactly. I could give up my professional podcasting career. Thank you to Gary from Quantum Sound Productions.
Hold on, Blue Jay. Oh, come on, Blue Jay. I know that you guys are Tigers fans.
This is like an hour and a half.
The Blue Jays are home. Playoff baseball returns to Toronto on Friday.
It does.
Go Jays, go.
Yeah, they had the
and hockey season's coming. Go Wings.
It is. Yeah, 3 games.
And Leafs.
There we go.
Wow.
Year in review conversation. We'll do it again. But thank you, Sebastian Schmoranz from McGregor Sims Schmoranz law firm in Kingsville, for joining us to discuss everything that we did today and putting a nice little bow on 183 Main. We will join you next time. Join us next time on That Kingsville podcast. Thanks for listening.